Lord Vader. Lord Vader, can you hear me? These were the first words to claw their way through the haze of his consciousness. They came distorted, warped, as if whispered from beneath an ocean. The voice was both familiar and foreign, soothing and venomous. It didn't matter, because the sound itself hurt. Every vibration sent needles of fire through his skull, stabbing at senses that no longer seemed his own. He tried to open his eyes. Nothing. Darkness. Not the comforting dark of sleep, not the meditative calm of closing one's eyes. This was a suffocating dark, a dark that pressed down on him, like weight, like gravity, like the galaxy itself had collapsed upon him. And then breath. Not his own. A rasp, mechanical and cold, dragging in air with all the grace of a dying animal. It was the loudest thing in existence. In, out, a hiss, a growl. Each cycle tearing through his awareness like the steady toll of a funeral bell. He realized with a slow and dawning horror that it was not coming from around him. It was coming from him. Something inside him, no, something that had replaced him, was breathing for him. Memory returned like shards of glass. Fire. Screams. Sand turned to molten glass. A blade of blue light above him, his brother's voice trembling with sorrow and rage. You were the chosen one. And then pain. Unending, unyielding pain that had devoured him until he thought there would be nothing left to feel. He had begged her name as the world burned away. Padme. Dadme. Her face had been the last thing he'd seen before the flames claimed him. Was this death? No. Death would have been kind. This was something else. A voice slithered back into his awareness. Lord Vader, rise. Rise? He tried to move. And for a moment he thought he had failed. Because the thing that stirred beneath him didn't feel like him. It was slow, clumsy, and it groaned with the sound of servos grinding against metal. Every gesture felt borrowed, like his mind was piloting a corpse. Finally, the weight of his torso lifted from the table, and the table itself groaned back as though it resented him for surviving. Shapes began to form in his vision. Not real shapes, not colors as he remembered them. The world appeared filtered, stripped of warmth, every edge sharp and exaggerated. The brightness burned his eyes, though he knew he could feel it was dim. What had they done to him? His body was a map of agony. Every inch screamed. Some screams were sharp, like knives twisting in his muscles. Others were dull, like iron weights dragging his bones into the abyss. And beneath it all, there was a deeper pain, a hollow, aching absence where limbs should have been. He willed his left hand to move. Something clattered. Fingers of metal, unfamiliar and heavy, responded, but not as he intended. The hand flexed with all the subtlety of a hammer, clunky and imprecise. His right leg, nothing. Then a delay, a shudder, and a weighted thud against the floor that didn't even feel like a step. Panic slithered into his chest. Was this permanent? Was this him? He reached for the force, desperate for the familiar surge of power, the tide that had always obeyed his call. But it didn't feel the same. It was there, vast, dark and violent, but it was no longer a song. It was a storm. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if he was commanding it or if it was laughing at him. The voice returned. You are strong. You are whole. You are mine. The realization landed with the weight of a starship. Palpatine. His master. The man who had promised him salvation, promised him power, promised him a way to save her. And yet, where is Padme? The words weren't words at all, but a distorted growl that rattled through the speakers in his mask. He could barely recognize the sound as his own voice. The answer came soft, almost kind. It seems, in your anger, you killed her. The storm inside him exploded. No, that wasn't possible. He had done all of this for her. He had torn apart the Jedi. He had slaughtered children. He had burned the galaxy just to hold her in his arms again. And now, the medical droid screamed before he even realized he was moving. Metal crumpled. Glass shattered. The operating table buckled under the invisible weight of his fury. Walls trembled as instruments and machinery were flung like leaves in a storm. And through it all, that breathing, his breathing, roared like a beast unleashed. In, out, hiss, growl. His grief didn't consume him. It forged him. In that moment, Anakin Skywalker burned away for the final time. All that remained was Darth Vader. But even as his rage threatened to tear the room apart, something far colder slithered beneath it. Resolve. If she was gone, then so too was the man who had loved her. And if that man was dead, then this new being would serve a single purpose. To never be weak again, to never lose again. He turned his head toward the silhouette watching him from the shadows. Palpatine didn't flinch at the destruction. He didn't raise a hand to defend himself. He simply smiled, and in that smile, Vader understood his first lesson as a Sith. Everything he had suffered had been intentional. The pain, the armor, the loss, all of it designed not just to break him, but to bind him. Forever. And yet, somewhere deep inside, beneath the metal and the rage, a single thought whispered like an ember refusing to die. One day, I will destroy you, but not today. Today, he would serve. Today, he would learn. And today was only the first day of Darth Vader's first year as the Dark Lord of the Sith. The first hours after his awakening were not triumph. They were study. Study of the prison he now inhabited. And at first he did not even understand that it was a prison. He thought it was simply his body. But as he moved, as he breathed, as he listened, the truth carved itself into him with every step. This was not life. This was a design, and it had been designed to hurt. The suit was heavy, though not in the way of armor. It was heavy like regret, heavy like obligation, pressing him forward, forcing him to bend. His boots were weighted in their heels, pitching him slightly toward the ground, so that every stride felt like walking uphill through mud. The joints squeaked, just faintly, but loud enough that he could never forget they were there. Each motion of his arms was deliberate, mechanical, never natural. The right arm, the one he had lost years before, felt almost trustworthy. It moved with crisp obedience as though it remembered the rhythm of his old cybernetic limb. But the left arm, his new creation, betrayed him constantly. Sometimes it lagged, responding seconds too late. Sometimes it spasmed, fingers twitching, as though mocking his attempts at control. And though both arms were strong, terrifyingly strong, they lacked the precision he had once taken for granted. Where once he could disassemble a speeder engine blindfolded, now he could barely close his hand around a scalpel without bending the metal. He noticed other flaws, subtler ones, designed to gnaw at him over time. The synthetic skin, grafted to what little flesh remained of him, itched incessantly as though it rejected his very existence. It required constant cleansing, the peeling away of necrotic tissue, a process that stank of rot and acid. The bodysuit that pressed against this fragile layer bunched and snagged, rubbing against his wrists and knees until they blistered beneath the prosthetics. And then there was the mask. It filtered light through a narrow spectrum, but not the way a visor might sharpen one's senses. Instead, it distorted them, forcing him to tilt his entire head just to see his own feet. Peripheral vision was a memory. Every turn of his head was exaggerated, dramatic, as though mocking him for needing to look. The sound design was worse. Palpatine's medical droids had rebuilt the cartilage of his ears, but his eardrums were gone. Now, sound arrived through implants, metallic and shallow, as though the galaxy spoke to him from underwater. Too much came in at once. Every hum of electricity, every hiss of hydraulics, every click of a distant console, all of it clung to him, echoing, overlapping, impossible to sort. Sometimes his own breathing was so loud in his senses that it drowned out the words of those speaking to him. And that breathing, always that breathing, it wasn't just noise, it was punishment. The respirator fed oxygen into his ravaged lungs through tubes drilled directly into his chest, bypassing the very concept of breath. The chest plate that regulated it all beeped at random intervals. Meaningless beeps, perhaps intentionally meaningless, ensuring he never truly knew if something was wrong. The mask hissed on every intake, growled on every exhale, like the sound of an animal caged inside him. He had not yet discovered the hyperbaric chamber. He could not remove the helmet. There was no escape from the sound of himself. And so sleep became impossible. The few times exhaustion overpowered him, he awoke choking, suffocating in nightmares where he was still burning on Mustafar, his breath syncing perfectly with the rasp of the mask. Even nourishment was humiliation. He could eat only within a pressurized chamber, face bare and exposed, a process so laborious it hardly seemed worth it. More often he was fed through tubes, bitter nutrient paste dripped into his mask, or liquid sustenance pumped directly into his veins. Waste disposal was handled through catheters and recyclers. Efficient, yes, but degrading in ways words could not capture. He was not a man who wore armor. He was armor that carried the corpse of a man. And yet, as miserable as it was, the design fascinated him. Because he understood machines. Machines had purpose. Machines reflected the intent of their creator. And this machine was not built to make him strong. It was built to remind him that he was weak. He suspected almost immediately that this had been deliberate. Grievous had been faster, stronger, deadlier, his cybernetics finely tuned to slaughter Jedi by the dozens. Vader's suit, though modeled after that template, was crude in comparison. Slower servos, heavier plating, cheaper alloys that corroded easily in moisture, requiring constant maintenance. Even the sensors in his mask lacked proper discrimination, flooding him with useless data while hiding what actually mattered. Palpatine had ordered this, not as an oversight, as a lesson, as a chain. And Vader understood the lesson. He was meant to hate it. Hate it enough to grow beyond it. Hate it enough to become something stronger than the machine. But not yet. Not now. Now he was expected to endure. And so he studied every flaw of his prison, memorized every cruel imperfection. One day, he told himself, he would master it. One day, the machine would obey him as surely as a lightsaber obeyed its wielder. But for now, each step was a battlefield. And in those first 4 weeks after awakening, Darth Vader's greatest mission was learning how to walk like a man again. Palpatine watched all of this with amusement. Sometimes he would visit unannounced, his voice slithering through the air like oil. "My boy," he would say, "you must embrace the pain. It will make you strong." Vader never replied. He couldn't. Words felt inadequate. Instead, he channeled his answer into his steps, each one more controlled than the last, until he could cross the room without stumbling. And then he began to think about what else this body could do. If his movements were slow, then he would make them inevitable. If his breathing was loud, then he would turn it into a weapon, a sound that froze hearts before he even ignited his blade. He began experimenting with small force manipulations, compensating for what the machine could not give him. Where his arms failed him, the Force extended his reach. Where his legs betrayed him, the Force steadied his stance. Slowly, painfully, Darth Vader was not adapting to the suit. He was forcing the suit to adapt to him. And in this process, an idea took root. This body might have been designed to break him, but it would become the body that broke the galaxy. Still, before he could claim that destiny, Palpatine had another task for him, a task that would demand more than endurance. It would demand blood. Not hope. Hope was dead. But the hunger to act, to unleash all that he had become, was very much alive. And it would begin with blood. The Force had always been his ally. Even as a boy, when he didn't fully understand it, it had sung to him. It had whispered through engines, telling him how to fix them before he even saw the problem. It had guided his pod on the sands of Tatooine, wrapping around him like invisible hands, pushing him past the finish line. As a Jedi, it had been a constant tide, sometimes raging, sometimes calm, but always present, always loyal. But now it felt like something else entirely. In the quiet of his new existence, when the breathing machine hissed and growled and the walls of his chamber pressed in like a coffin, he reached for it, and the Force reached back. But it was not a tide anymore. It was a storm. A storm that did not care whether he drowned. The Jedi had spoken of harmony, balance. They had taught that the Force was an ally, a friend, an extension of the self. The Sith had spoken of power, dominion. They had promised that the dark side would bend the Force to his will. But neither description matched what he felt now. This was not harmony. And it was certainly not dominion. This was slavery. His rage gave him strength. Yes, it amplified his will, fed him raw power in surges so strong they left the air trembling around him. But that power was never free. It demanded more. Every time he drew on it, the storm seemed to grow. It clawed at him, urging him to hate more deeply, to destroy more completely. And for the first time in his life, he wondered if he was wielding the dark side, or if it was wielding him. Meditation became unbearable. The Jedi method of clearing his mind now felt like suffocation. The Sith method of focusing on passion left him burning, unable to cool the fire. So he created his own method. He began to meditate on pain, not to avoid it, not to overcome it, but to catalog it. He studied every scream of his nerves, every rasp of his breath, every limitation of the machine that caged him. He turned his body into a map of suffering, and then he turned that map into a weapon. If the dark side demanded his agony, he would give it willingly, but on his terms. And in doing so, he discovered something new. The Force responded differently when channeled through hatred that was cold, but something sharper, controlled, purposeful. He could hold his anger like a blade, not a fire. These moments were fleeting, fragile, and he clung to them as proof that he was not just a puppet dancing on Palpatine's strings. Still, his connection to the Force had changed in ways he could not ignore. Where once it flowed effortlessly through his limbs, now it snagged and sputtered at the interface between flesh and metal. His prosthetics were strong, but they were silent. The Force did not hume through them, as it had through living tissue. When he reached out with his senses, the galaxy felt dimmer, like someone had draped a veil between him and everything else. Every heartbeat in the room became a drum. Every emotion within miles became a color, vivid and searing. It was intoxicating. It was also horrifying, because he realized that he no longer sensed life as life. He sensed it as fuel. Everything he touched with the Force now came with a single, unspoken question: what can this give me? And if it could give nothing, it was meaningless. It was this new perspective that began to shape his early meditations. He stopped trying to see the Force as a partner. He stopped trying to see it as something to conquer. Instead, he began to see it as a landscape vast, dangerous, and full of resources to exploit. He was no longer swimming in its current. He was hunting within it. Palpatine noticed this shift almost immediately. The Emperor would watch him in silence as he practiced, the faint curl of amusement on his lips. "You are beginning to understand," he would murmur. "The Force is not your master, nor is it your servant. It is your prey, and the dark side rewards those who feed upon it." Vader said nothing, but inside, he disagreed. The dark side was no prey, it was a predator. And the only reason it allowed him to feed upon it was because, for now, it found him useful. That, too, would change. In his rare moments of solitude, when the mask hissed and growled and the nutrient paste sloshed coldly into his veins, he would sit perfectly still and imagine something impossible. a day when the storm itself bent in fear of him. But that day was far away. For now, Palpatine had given him his first true assignment. An opportunity to test not just his mastery of the suit, but of this new, fractured relationship with the Force. And as he prepared, Vader discovered something surprising. For the first time since Mustafar, he felt something almost like anticipation, not hope. Hope was dead, but the hunger to act, to unleash all that he had become, was very much alive. And it would begin with blood. After weeks confined to the stark solitude of his chambers, Darth Vader received his first true command from Emperor Palpatine. It was a mission of grim significance, a task designed not just to test his physical mastery over the burdensome armor, but to mark his rebirth as the galaxy's most feared enforcer. The target was the planet Marana. A world once embroiled in the Clone Wars, Marana now simmered with unrest. A clone squadron stationed there had defied Order 66, their loyalty to their Jedi generals overriding Imperial command. This was not just insubordination, it was a spark threatening to ignite rebellion at a time when the Empire demanded absolute obedience. Palpatine's voice echoed in Vader's mind as he prepared for deployment. "You will make an example, Lord Vader. Show the galaxy that defiance is futile. Crush the traitors, and with them, any hope that remains for the Jedi." The weight of the mission was immense, but for Vader, it was more than duty. It was an opportunity to prove that despite his broken body, his fractured connection to the Force, he was still a terror unmatched. His armor clanked with every deliberate step as he boarded the shuttle bound for Marana. The helmet's visor glinted ominously, a black mirror reflecting the cold void ahead. Once on Marana's surface, the true test began. Tracking the rogue clones and surviving Jedi required all of Vader's senses, both mechanical and mystical. Yet the suit's limitations pulled at him relentlessly. His vision was narrow, sounds muddled, and his limbs still awkward with their synthetic servos. But he adapted quickly. The Force filled in the gaps his body could not compensate for. He summoned it to steady his footing, heighten his reflexes, and sharpen his intuition. One by one, the traitorous clones were found and eliminated. Vader moved through the jungle with relentless precision, a shadow cutting through the foliage, his lightsaber ignited with a hiss, its crimson blade a beacon of judgment. Each confrontation was brutal but efficient, his movements calculated and merciless. Yet it was not just the clones who felt his wrath. The 3 Jedi Knights who had escaped Order 66 became his obsession. They represented everything he had lost: his past, his failures, the ghosts of Anakin Skywalker. Hunting them became both a duty and a personal vendetta. The chase was relentless, spanning months and distant star systems. Through it all, Vader's combat style evolved. No longer the agile, Ataru form of his youth, his technique adapted to the suit's constraints. He developed a brutal efficiency, strong, direct strikes paired with devastating use of the Force to unbalance and overpower foes. The rage that burned inside him was now channeled with cold precision. Palpatine observed his apprentice's progress with satisfaction. Vader was becoming the instrument of the Empire's will, a living symbol of its ruthless power. Yet beneath the helmet, beneath the armor, the man who was once Anakin Skywalker still wrestled with grief and doubt. But those vulnerabilities would not be allowed to show. For the Emperor demanded strength, and Vader was determined to deliver. The hunt consumed him. Not just the mission assigned by the Emperor, but something far more personal, far darker. Obsession was a beast that clawed at the edges of his mind, refusing to be ignored. At times it felt as though the suit itself, cold and unyielding, was a cage too small to contain the fire raging inside him. Each failed encounter with the surviving Jedi was a fresh wound, seeping with the bitter venom of frustration and rage. He could not afford failure. Yet it haunted him. The ghosts of his past, Anakin Skywalker's memories, tangled with the nightmare of Darth Vader's present, blurring the lines between hatred and sorrow. The Jedi he hunted were reminders of all he had destroyed, all he had lost, and all he had betrayed. Vader's footsteps echoed hollowly through the corridors of the Death Star, a somber rhythm to the symphony of his relentless pursuit. The Empire's strongest warriors, legions of stormtroopers and dark acolytes, were at his disposal, yet it was Vader alone who carried the weight of this obsession. Orders from the Emperor came cold and clear: eliminate any surviving Jedi, crush any flicker of rebellion, enforce the new order with iron will. But Vader's pursuit was more than imperial duty. It was a vendetta, one that etched itself into every thought, every breath, every flicker of his mechanical heart. He scoured the outer rim, the mid-rim, and the unknown regions. Planets burned beneath his wrath. Civilizations fell silent in the wake of his blade. Yet the Jedi eluded him. Each narrow escape stoked the fires of his obsession, twisting it tighter around his soul. To hunt the Jedi was to hunt himself. The conflict was unbearable, his identity torn between who he was and what he had become. It drove him to extremes. Vader pushed the limits of his body and mind, testing his cybernetic suit to the point of breakdown. Long hours of meditation were broken by violent outbursts. Force powers were wielded recklessly, sometimes to devastating effect, other times leaving him exhausted and vulnerable. He experimented endlessly with the dark side, seeking ways to bind it more tightly to his will. But the dark side was a tempest, a power that could never be fully tamed. One mission in particular marked a turning point. On the forest moon of Endor, Vader tracked a Jedi survivor believed to be hiding among the dense trees and ancient ruins. The moon was quiet, deceptively peaceful, its green canopy masking the tension beneath. For days, Vader stalked through the undergrowth, sensing shadows in the Force that flickered and vanished like ghosts. The Jedi was cunning, using the Force to mask their presence and evade detection. Vader's frustration grew with each passing hour. His breath rasped harshly through the mask, echoing like a death knell in the silent forest. Finally, a confrontation erupted in a clearing bathed in moonlight. The Jedi emerged, blade ignited with a blue glow, face obscured by a hood. The duel was fierce and unyielding. Vader's powerful, methodical strikes clashed against the Jedi's fluid, evasive maneuvers. The Force surged between them, crackling with raw energy. But Vader's suit, despite its strength, constrained his agility. The Jedi exploited every hesitation, every mechanical lag. The duel ended abruptly when Vader's lightsaber sliced through the Jedi's defensive stance, delivering a fatal blow. As the Jedi fell, their hood slipped back to reveal a familiar face. A face that echoed with a whisper of the past. It was a former friend, one Vader had once called brother. The victory was hollow. Vader knelt beside the fallen Jedi, memories flooding his mind like a tidal wave. Pain, loss, betrayal, all mingled in the choking haze behind his mask. He reached out with the Force, feeling the last flicker of life fade away. Then, with a quiet finality, he rose. His obsession had deepened, fueled by this reminder of what he had sacrificed, and what the galaxy still owed him. From this moment, Vader's hunt grew colder, more relentless. He became a shadow of death, a relentless storm that no Jedi could outrun. But obsession has a price. It began to corrode his humanity, the last fragile threads of Anakin's soul slipping away. He isolated himself further, withdrawing from those around him. His relationship with Palpatine grew strained, the Emperor's patience wearing thin as Vader's fixation bordered on dangerous obsession. Still, Vader pressed on, driven by a mixture of rage, guilt, and a desperate need for redemption only he could define. He spent hours alone, meditating in the quiet chambers deep within the Death Star. His thoughts spiraled, wrestling with the duality of his existence, machine and man, Sith and fallen Jedi. He pored over holocrons and data logs, seeking knowledge that might sharpen his power or ease his torment. He experimented with new techniques, combining brute strength with subtle Force manipulations. Yet, sleep remained elusive. Nightmares haunted him, visions of Mustafar's flames, of Padme's sorrowful eyes, and the faces of those he had failed. His breathing machine was a constant companion, a metronome marking the relentless passage of time. And still, the obsession deepened. Vader's name became synonymous with fear and vengeance across the galaxy. Whispers spread among the scattered rebels and remnants of the Jedi Order. The Dark Lord's wrath was unending. His presence a warning defiance would be crushed without mercy. But beneath the armor, beneath the terror, the man struggled. He was trapped between what he was and what he hoped to become. And the only way forward was through obsession, through the relentless pursuit of power, vengeance, and the ghosts of his past. The Empire did not build itself. It thrived on fear, control, and a ruthless network of enforcers who answered only to Darth Sidious and his chosen champion, Darth Vader. In this shadowy web, Vader was both the hunter and the master. But even the Dark Lord, clad in black armor and wielding a crimson blade, could not enforce the Emperor's will alone. He needed others, agents whose brutality matched his own, whose loyalty was forged in fire and fear. Vader's army was a reflection of the Empire's darkest corners, populated by those whose minds teetered on the edge of madness. Men and women who thrived on chaos and violence, driven by obsession and ambition. These were the psychos, the assassins, the enforcers who answered Vader's call without question or hesitation. From the moment Vader awoke in his armor, he began assembling this deadly cadre. His criteria were clear: loyalty above all else, and a willingness to embrace the dark side's cruelty. Among his first recruits was a figure shrouded in mystery, a warrior known only as Black Talon. Black Talon was a ruthless bounty hunter, with a reputation for bloodshed across the Outer Rim. He had once been a mercenary, a loner who answered only to the highest bidder. But Vader saw something in him, a raw potential to be shaped into a weapon for the Empire. Under Vader's command, Black Talon became a scourge, leading squads of stormtroopers on covert missions to eliminate dissidents and hunted Jedi. His methods were brutal, often involving psychological torture as much as physical violence. Black Talon's reputation spread quickly, his name whispered in fear across rebel enclaves. Yet, he was only one among many. Another of Vader's most notorious agents was Lady Vex, a Sith acolyte whose mastery of the Force was as dark as her ambition. Vex was as cunning as she was merciless, using her powers to manipulate, deceive, and destroy. Her signature was the use of mind tricks to infiltrate enemy ranks, turning allies into enemies and sowing chaos from within. Vader valued her skills, but distrusted her unpredictable nature. Still, in the brutal politics of the Sith, power was the only currency that mattered. Vex was indispensable. Alongside these figures, Vader cultivated a legion of stormtroopers specially trained for his missions. Elite soldiers conditioned to operate with deadly efficiency and little regard for their own lives. Many were veterans of the Clone Wars, their loyalty reprogrammed, their memories fractured. Others were new recruits, indoctrinated from childhood into the Empire's harsh doctrine. Together, they formed Vader's personal strike force, a relentless wave of destruction and intimidation. The Death Squadron was their name, feared even among the ranks of the Imperial military. Their uniforms were darker, their armor reinforced, their tactics brutal and unrelenting. They carried out assassinations, sabotage, and terror campaigns across the galaxy, all under Vader's direct command. But commanding such a volatile group required more than just fear. It demanded control. Vader's leadership style was authoritarian, but strategic. He demanded obedience, but rewarded ruthlessness. Failure was met with swift and often brutal punishment. Yet those who excelled were given more power, more freedom to unleash their cruelty. This balance kept the army functional, a dark symphony of chaos held in check by Vader's iron will. Behind the scenes, Vader spent hours training his lieutenants and operatives in both combat and the use of the Force. He pushed them to their limits, seeking to mold them into extensions of his own power. Many were scarred, broken individuals who found new purpose in serving the dark side. The lines between loyalty and fanaticism blurred in the shadows of Vader's command. At times, the cruelty of his army shocked even Vader himself. He did not shy away from violence, but there were moments when the chaos seemed to spiral beyond control. Yet Vader understood that terror was a tool, and in the Empire's ruthless expansion, that tool needed to be wielded with precision. His army of psychos was both his weapon and his warning to the galaxy. Defiance would be crushed, dissent would be extinguished, and the dark side would reign supreme. And so Vader's first year continued, a brutal campaign of blood and shadow. The passage of time was relentless. Vader's first year in his black armor had become an unyielding crucible, a furnace that burned away what little remained of Anakin Skywalker. Each day, each battle, each moment spent in that cursed suit transformed him. Part man, part machine, and something altogether darker. The armored shell that confined him was no longer a prison, but a second skin. One that hid his pain and his rage from a galaxy that feared him. Yet beneath the cold exterior, beneath the mechanical breathing that echoed like the tolling of a death knell, Vader's mind churned. Memories of a life long lost haunted him relentlessly. Faces blurred by time but seared into his soul. Padme Amidala's sorrowful gaze, Obi-Wan Kenobi's anguished betrayal, his mother's gentle love, all these flickered like fragile lights struggling to survive in a sea of darkness. The first year had been a battle, not just against the remnants of the Jedi or the rebellious clones who dared defy the Empire, but a battle within himself. His limbs, once fluid and sure, had grown stiff and cumbersome in the heavy armor. The synthetic limbs that replaced what fire had taken felt foreign, difficult to control. Every movement was a reminder of what had been lost. Yet, he adapted. With each passing day, Vader grew stronger. The Force, once a source of solace and hope, had become a weapon forged in pain and rage. He learned to wield it not as a guardian, but as an executioner. His mastery over it deepened, honed by necessity and obsession. But power came at a cost. His connection to the Force was no longer pure, but tainted by the dark side's corrosive influence. It fed on his anger, his guilt, his torment, and in return it demanded more pain, more sacrifice, more destruction. Vader's first year was marked by relentless missions. Orders from the Emperor were clear: eliminate all surviving Jedi, crush rebellion, enforce the New Order without mercy. He traveled across star systems, from the Outer Rim's forgotten worlds to the core planets where whispers of resistance still lingered. Each mission was a symphony of destruction. Starships reduced to wreckage, entire outposts razed, enemies hunted to the brink of extinction. His reputation grew. Whispers of the Dark Lord's wrath spread through the galaxy like wildfire. To his enemies, Vader was a specter of death, an unstoppable force that shattered hope, but the victories were hollow. For every Jedi he struck down, every rebel he crushed, a piece of his soul slipped further into shadow. The obsession that had driven him to hunt his former brethren gnawed at his mind. It was not just duty, it was a personal vendetta, born of guilt and rage. Each encounter with a surviving Jedi was a reminder of what he had lost, what he had destroyed. The pain was unbearable, yet he fed on it, letting it fuel his dark power. In the quiet moments between missions, Vader withdrew into himself. The meditation chambers aboard the Death Star became his refuge. There, stripped of armor and weapons, he faced the void within. But peace was elusive. The memories tormented him, twisting into nightmares that plagued his sleep, or what passed for sleep within the confines of his suit. Visions of Mustafar's flames, of Padme's lifeless form, of Obi-Wan's final words haunted his dreams. He awoke gasping, the harsh rasp of his respirator filling the silence. The suit that sustained his life was also his cage. It isolated him, separated him from the world and from the man he once was. Despite his growing power, Vader was lonely. His few interactions were cold and calculated, a veneer of control masking the turmoil within. Even his relationship with the Emperor was strained. Palpatine saw Vader as a tool, powerful, yes, but volatile and unpredictable. The Dark Lord's obsession bordered on defiance, a trait the Emperor tolerated only because of Vader's effectiveness. Yet beneath the mask, Vader questioned everything. Was this the destiny he had chosen? Was this the man he wanted to become? These questions festered in the darkest corners of his mind, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Vader's transformation was far from complete. His style of combat evolved as well. The graceful Ataru forms of his youth were gone, replaced by a brutal, mechanical precision. He developed techniques that leveraged his suit's strength, compensating for its limitations with raw power and calculated force abilities. His new lightsaber was larger, heavier, reflecting the man who wielded it. It was a symbol of the transformation he had undergone, a melding of past and present, man and machine, light and dark. The galaxy was changing too. The Jedi Order was fractured, hunted to near extinction. Rebel cells were scattered but resilient, fueled by hope and defiance. The Empire's grip was tightening, but so was the tension beneath the surface. Vader stood at the center of this storm, both its enforcer and its symbol. He was the embodiment of the new order, yet also a living reminder of the cost of that order's rise. As the first year drew to a close, Vader's thoughts turned to the future. What lay ahead was uncertain. Would he continue down this path of destruction, becoming more machine than man? Or was there still a chance to reclaim something of Anakin Skywalker, buried beneath layers of darkness and regret? For now, those questions remained unanswered. But one thing was clear: the legend of Darth Vader was only just beginning. The galaxy would come to know him as the ultimate instrument of fear, a shadow that would haunt the stars for decades to come. And yet, beneath the armor, the broken man still lived, haunted, obsessed, and forever changed by the flames of his own making. The first year was over. But the journey had only just begun. The dawn of Vader's second quarter in his first year was marked not by rest, but by relentless motion. Wherever whispers of surviving Jedi stirred, wherever rebellion flickered like a dying flame, Vader was there, an unyielding force crushing hope beneath his boots. He had become more than a man, a shadow cast by the dark side, striking fear into even the most hardened hearts. This was a year defined by missions that tested not only his strength, but the limits of his humanity. His first orders came swiftly after his recovery. Palpatine, ever the puppeteer, dispatched Vader to hunt down Jedi who had evaded Order 66, surviving in the Outer Rim's forgotten worlds. Vader accepted these assignments with cold efficiency. Yet beneath the mask, a storm of conflicting emotions churned. Every mission was a battle with ghosts: his former self, his lost love, and the ideals he had once cherished. One mission in particular defined the dark trajectory of his first year: the hunt for Master Shaak-Ti, a Jedi rumored to have taken refuge on the harsh volcanic world of Mustafar. Mustafar, the very planet where Anakin's fall had been cemented in fire and blood, now became the stage for a cruel confrontation. Vader's approach was methodical. He could not afford recklessness. His new armor and cybernetic limbs demanded precision, a calculated ferocity. The terrain was as unforgiving as his own transformation: rivers of lava slicing through cracked earth, choking clouds of ash, blotting out the sun. Tracking Shaak-Ti was no easy task. She was a master of stealth and the Force, elusive and cunning. The duel that followed was fierce and brutal. Vader wielded his lightsaber with deadly power, his strikes heavy but precise, compensating for his encumbered frame. Shaak-Ti matched him with grace, her saber movements fluid and quick, a haunting reminder of the Jedi ideals Vader had abandoned. But the dark side was unforgiving, and Vader's rage fed the Force itself, giving him strength born of anguish. In the end, Shaak-Ti was defeated, her last stand a silent testament to the man he once was and the monster he had become. The victory, though, brought no peace. It was a hollow triumph, stained with the blood of a ghost. Vader's obsession with hunting Jedi grew deeper, an addiction to the chase that masked his inner torment. But it was not just Jedi who fell under his blade. Disloyal clones, rebel sympathizers, political enemies, all were swept aside by the tide of his wrath. He became the Emperor's executioner in the truest sense, his shadow reaching into every corner of the galaxy. Vader's tactics evolved alongside his physical adaptation. He began coordinating with Imperial intelligence and the fledgling Inquisitorius, a secretive order created to assist in rooting out Jedi and insurgents. These agents, trained in the dark arts but far less powerful than Vader himself, served as extensions of his will. They hunted in packs, striking fear into rebel hideouts, and gathering intelligence that Vader used to devastating effect. The Dark Lord's presence became synonymous with sudden destruction. Bases obliterated overnight, whole cells decimated before they could rise. Vader learned to wield fear as a weapon, using it to break wills and bend entire populations into submission. Yet beneath a veneer of merciless authority, he remained haunted by doubts. Had he truly extinguished Anakin Skywalker? Was the man within the armor completely lost? Or was there still a spark waiting to be rekindled? Vader's internal conflict was a battlefield all its own, one that no lightsaber could cut through. During moments of solitude, he revisited memories, visions of Padme's smile, her last words whispered in the dark. These moments struck him with a pain deeper than any wound inflicted by battle. The darkness within fought against the flicker of light struggling to survive. Vader's first year had shown him the terrible cost of power, the sacrifice of self for the sake of control. The question remained, was that sacrifice worth the price? As his first year ended, Vader stood more powerful, more feared, yet more alone than ever before. The galaxy trembled beneath his shadow, and the saga of Darth Vader was only beginning. The physical battles were only one part of Vader's war in his first year. Beneath the surface, an even darker conflict raged within his mind and spirit, a psychological war that would shape the Dark Lord forever. The Emperor, Palpatine, was no mere master of politics and military power. He was a master manipulator, a puppeteer, whose greatest weapon was not his vast Sith power, but the control he exerted over those who served him, especially Vader. From the moment Vader awoke in that suit of black armor, he was under the Emperor's thumb. Palpatine's voice was a constant presence, both a comfort and a chain. "You are mine, Lord Vader," the Emperor would say in his cold, commanding tone. "You have been remade to serve the destiny I have carved for you." But Vader was no longer the naive Anakin Skywalker who had once dreamed of saving the galaxy. He had tasted the dark side's bitter fruit, felt its intoxicating power, but also its suffocating grit. Palpatine demanded loyalty without question, obedience without hesitation. Yet Vader's mind was a battleground. On one side, the dark side fueled his rage and strength. On the other, the remnants of his former self whispered doubts and regrets, haunting him like ghosts. In his meditation chamber aboard the Death Star, Vader would confront these shadows in endless cycles. He would relive his failures, the moments on Mustafar, the loss of Padme, the betrayal by Obi-Wan. Each memory struck like a blade, twisting the knife deeper into his fractured soul. The suit that preserved his life also imprisoned him within his pain. Vader's cybernetic body was a constant reminder of his fall, a mechanical cage sealing away what humanity remained. Even the steady rasp of his breathing, the sound so familiar to the galaxy, was a constant reminder of his fragile mortality. In those quiet moments, the weight of his new existence pressed down upon him like a crushing black void. Yet Palpatine saw only a tool, a weapon to be wielded, and a lesson in control to be enforced. He tested Vader's obedience, pushing him to extremes, demanding ruthless efficiency in hunting Jedi and quashing dissent. At times, the Emperor's demands clashed with Vader's own internal struggles. Vader wanted power, power to protect, to punish, to control, but not to be a slave to Palpatine's whims. This simmering tension was a spark that could ignite into rebellion or destruction. Vader's first year also marked the expansion of the Inquisitorius, the secret order created to assist him in his hunt. These Inquisitors were former Jedi or Force-sensitive individuals, broken and remade in the Emperor's image. They were hunters, spies, torturers, all tools in the dark game of control. Vader trained and directed them personally, shaping their skills and strategies. Though less powerful than Vader, they were numerous and relentless, spreading fear throughout the galaxy's farthest reaches. The psychological warfare was as brutal as the physical. Rebels and surviving Jedi were stalked, not just in battle, but in their minds. Vader employed intimidation, misinformation, and terror to wear down resistance. He understood that fear was the most potent weapon in the Empire's arsenal. His reputation alone was often enough to break enemy morale before a single saber was drawn. One notorious campaign was the destruction of the rebel base on the ice world of Ryloth. The base had sheltered several Jedi survivors, and Vader led the assault himself. Stormtroopers advanced amid blizzards, their movements methodical and merciless. Vader's presence was felt like a cold shadow descending upon the defenders. The battle was swift and merciless. Jedi was slain, rebels captured or executed, and the base reduced to ruins, but the victory came at a cost. Vader's suit sustained damage from the harsh environment and heavy combat. His mobility was once again compromised, forcing him to adapt his fighting style further. He began incorporating more use of the Force to compensate, relying on telekinesis and precognition to level the playing field. These adaptations made him even deadlier, but also more dependent on the dark side's power. In the weeks following Rebirth, Vader's nights were restless. He was plagued by visions, not only of his enemies but of Padme and the life he had lost. The pain was almost unbearable, yet he welcomed it, embracing suffering as a form of penance. Palpatine's influence grew stronger. The Emperor began testing Vader's limits, sending him on increasingly dangerous missions designed to sharpen his ruthlessness. One such mission was the purge of the Jedi Enclave on the jungle moon of Felucia. Vader led a brutal assault, unleashing a fury that left no survivors. The lush, vibrant world was scarred by fire and destruction, a mirror of Vader's own damaged soul. The echoes of screams and the scent of burning foliage haunted his dreams. But even as he crushed enemies, Vader wrestled with the knowledge that his actions further distanced him from Anakin Skywalker. He questioned whether he was becoming the monster he feared, yet there was no turning back. The dark side's grip was unyielding, binding him ever tighter. By the end of his first year, Vader's psychological war had reached a crescendo. His identity was fractured, part man, part machine, part dark force. His allegiance to the Emperor was absolute, yet his spirit simmered with unresolved pain and rebellion. The galaxy trembled beneath his shadow, and the legend of Darth Vader, forged in fire and shadow, was just beginning to cast its long and terrible shadow over the stars. The final months of Darth Vader's first year marked a profound transformation, not only in his power, but in his very identity. No longer simply the fearsome warrior hunting Jedi in the shadows, Vader was becoming a symbol, an icon of the Empire's ruthless will. The black-clad figure clad in armor, breathing with mechanical rasp, was a living nightmare to those who opposed the new order. But beneath the armor, the man, if one could still call him that, was locked in an unending struggle to reconcile his past with the darkness that had consumed him. Vader's missions grew more ambitious, his tactics more ruthless, but also more calculated. He learned to use fear as a weapon not only on the battlefield but across entire systems. The Emperor's will was absolute, but Vader was beginning to understand that power was also about perception. To rule through fear, he had to become more than a man. He had to become a legend. His first mission after the mid-year point was a chilling demonstration of this evolution. The Emperor ordered Vader to suppress a burgeoning rebellion on the mineral-rich world of Ord Mantell. Ord Mantell's rough terrain and vast underground caverns made it a haven for insurgents and escaped Jedi. Vader arrived with overwhelming force, but instead of launching a full-scale assault, he employed psychological tactics to break the resistance. Using captured rebels as bait, he orchestrated staged executions, sending clear messages to any who dared oppose the Empire. His methods were brutal but effective. The rebel leaders were broken, surrendering one by one under the weight of despair and fear. Ord Mantell was pacified not merely by weapons, but by the shadow Vader cast across its populace. Yet even as he enacted the Emperor's will, Vader's mind wandered to darker places. He found himself revisiting old memories, the friendship and betrayal of Obi-Wan, the lost love of Padme. In solitude, these ghosts clung to him, whispering doubts and regrets. But he pushed them down, burying his former self beneath layers of darkness and pain. The suit, once a prison, was now a part of him, his second skin. He had adapted to its limitations, mastering its cumbersome bulk and using the Force to compensate for his mechanical weaknesses. His lightsaber had also evolved. Vader had crafted a new weapon, heavier and more imposing than his Jedi days, a symbol of his new identity. Its crimson blade burned like the fires that had forged him anew, a beacon of terror to his foes. Combat was no longer about elegance or grace. Vader fought with overwhelming power, crushing enemies with a calculated brutality that left no room for mercy. His style was a dark reflection of the man he had been, strong, precise, but ruthless. Amid these physical changes, Vader's relationship with the Emperor deepened and grew more complex. Palpatine's influence was omnipresent, his will the guiding force behind every mission, every decision. Yet Vader began to chafe under this control, feeling the stirrings of rebellion deep within. He was the Emperor's apprentice, yes, but also his executioner, and the weight of that role bore heavily upon him. Despite his power, Vader remained a prisoner, not just of his armor, but of the dark destiny Palpatine had crafted for him. This tension shaped many of his interactions with Imperial officials and subordinates. Vader ruled with an iron fist, but he also knew the value of fear as a tool to command respect and obedience. He was feared, but he was also respected, a terrifying figure who demanded loyalty through sheer presence. The galaxy had heard his name whispered in fear for months now, but Vader worked to amplify that reputation. In a calculated display, he orchestrated public executions of high-profile rebels and traitors. These were brutal affairs, spectacles designed to crush hope and inspire dread. Vader's imposing figure, cloaked in black, standing silent and immovable amidst the screams and smoke, became a symbol of the Empire's unyielding power. But even as he consolidated his fearsome image, Vader's internal struggle persisted. He was a man trapped between worlds, the light of his past and the dark of his present. His use of the Force was both a comfort and a curse. He drew strength from it, but the dark side exacted a toll, twisting his mind and soul. Nightmares plagued his rare moments of rest. Visions of Padme's dying face, the screams of Mustafar, the betrayal of Obi-Wan, they haunted him ceaselessly. Vader's rage was both a weapon and a prison, feeding his power while chaining him to his pain. Amid the darkness, occasional flickers of compassion or doubt would surface, only to be buried quickly beneath layers of anger and resolve. One of the defining moments of Vader's final quarter in his first year was the mission to the planet Raxus Prime. Raxus Prime was a stronghold of the old Galactic Republic, filled with relics of the past and pockets of rebellion. Vader was tasked with rooting out insurgents and securing the planet for the Empire. The mission was brutal and uncompromising. Vader led a campaign of terror, striking swiftly and decisively against rebel forces. The campaign's climax was the destruction of a hidden Jedi temple deep within Raxus's wastelands. The temple was a sanctuary of hope for those who resisted the Empire, a place of light in a galaxy growing darker. Vader's assault was merciless. Using the full might of the Force and his lightsaber, he laid waste to the temple, killing every Jedi and suppressing any who dared stand. The victory was significant, but the cost weighed heavily on Vader. In the ruins of the temple, among the shattered relics and fallen bodies, he felt the ghost of his former self. This memory deepened his internal conflict, a reminder that the path he had chosen was one of destruction and loss. Yet the mission cemented Vader's status as the Emperor's ultimate weapon. His ruthless efficiency and terrifying power struck fear into every corner of the galaxy. By the end of his first year, Vader was no longer just a warrior or an enforcer. He was a symbol, a living embodiment of the Empire's will and the dark side's power. His presence was felt in every shadow, every whispered rumor of rebellion crushed before it could rise. But beneath the armor, behind the mask, the man was still there, haunted, broken, and endlessly fighting to reclaim some fragment of the boy he once was. The first year was over, but the legend of Darth Vader was only beginning to unfold. The first year of Darth Vader's new existence was far more than a tale of war and destruction. It was also a story of transformation on multiple levels, the forging of not only a warrior, but a dark icon, meant to inspire fear and obedience across the galaxy. By this stage, Vader's duties had expanded beyond his own missions. He was charged with overseeing the Inquisitorius, a growing order of dark-side acolytes tasked with hunting down remaining Jedi and rooting out dissent. These Inquisitors were broken beings, former Jedi, Force-sensitive youths, and criminals recruited and reshaped through brutal training. Vader saw them as tools, extensions of his will, yet they were also reminders of the fate that awaited those who fell to the dark side. Training the Inquisitors was both a duty and a test. Vader pushed them hard, demanding ruthless efficiency and unwavering loyalty. He drilled into them not only combat skills, but the cold mindset necessary to serve the Emperor without hesitation. But the Inquisitor's presence also forced Vader to confront parts of himself he wished to forget. Their youth and brokenness reminded him of Anakin Skywalker, the boy who once dreamed of saving the galaxy. He saw in them his own lost potential and the price of surrendering to the dark side. This duality gnawed at Vader's soul. His days were consumed by missions, his nights haunted by memories. He was caught in a cycle of violence and regret, driven forward by duty yet pulled back by lingering shadows of the past. One particularly harrowing mission during this phase was the siege of the rebel stronghold on the jungle world of Dantooine. Dantooine was once home to a Jedi enclave, and now harbored a substantial rebel cell that resisted the Empire's tightening grip. Vader approached the mission with his characteristic blend of overwhelming force and strategic cunning. The jungle's thick canopy and treacherous terrain made a direct assault difficult, so Vader employed a combination of psychological warfare and precision strikes. He sent his Inquisitors ahead, sowing fear and confusion among the rebels. Meanwhile, Vader prepared for a devastating strike aimed at the rebel leadership. The battle that followed was fierce and unforgiving. Rebels fought with desperation, but Vader's superior power and the Inquisitors' relentless hunting tactics proved decisive. The rebel cell was dismantled, its leaders captured or killed, but the victory was marred by Vader's personal struggle. During the battle, he encountered a young rebel Force-sensitive, barely more than a child, who reminded him painfully of his own lost innocence. The child's fear and hope stirred a rare flicker of compassion in Vader's heart. For a fleeting moment, the Dark Lord hesitated, a pause quickly swallowed by his resolve. He struck the child down, a cruel testament to his commitment to the dark side. The weight of that choice bore down on him, deepening the fracture within his soul. Back aboard the Death Star, Vader retreated to his meditation chamber, seeking solace in the dark embrace of the Force. He meditated not only to regain strength, but to wrestle with the conflicting emotions that threatened to consume him. In these moments, he confronted visions of his former life, the laughter of Padme, the friendship of Obi-Wan, the innocence lost on Mustafar. The dark side was a powerful ally, but it could not erase these memories. Instead, it magnified them, twisting his pain into rage and sorrow. Vader's mind became a battlefield where past and present clashed endlessly. This inner war shaped his actions in the months that followed. He became more ruthless, more distant, more determined to suppress the man he once was beneath the shadow of Darth Vader. Yet traces of Anakin Skywalker lingered, quiet, vulnerable, and deeply human. The Emperor, ever watchful, observed these moments closely. Palpatine knew that Vader's internal struggle could be both a strength and a weakness. He sought to channel Vader's pain into unyielding loyalty and power, but also to guard against rebellion. To that end, the Emperor imposed greater demands and tests, pushing Vader to prove his devotion through increasingly dangerous missions. One such test was the elimination of a secret Jedi enclave on the planet Ossus. Ossus was a sacred world, home to ancient Jedi temples and repositories of knowledge. The enclave was hidden deep in remote mountains, protected by natural defenses and powerful force wards. Vader's assault was a masterclass in strategy and dark power. He led a small strike team, including elite inquisitors, to penetrate the enclave's defenses. The battle was brutal and swift. Vader cut down Jedi defenders with terrifying efficiency, his lightsaber a blur of crimson fury. Despite the odds, the enclave was overwhelmed. Its libraries and relics were destroyed or confiscated, erasing centuries of Jedi knowledge. This victory was a significant blow to the Jedi Order's remnants and a personal triumph for Vader. Yet as he stood amidst the ruins, he felt the familiar sting of loss and regret. The destruction of such a sacred place echoed the destruction of his own soul. Throughout these missions, Vader's relationship with his armor and cybernetic enhancements continued to evolve. He became more adept at using the suit's limitations to his advantage, combining physical strength with force mastery. The suit's life support systems, though cumbersome, became an extension of his body. Vader's breathing, once a sign of vulnerability, was now an ominous trademark that announced his presence. His movements, once restricted, grew more fluid as he adapted his fighting style to the armor's constraints. This adaptation was a metaphor for his transformation, melding man and machine, light and dark, past and present. By the close of his first year, Darth Vader had become more than a weapon. He was a legend, feared, hated, and worshipped in equal measure. Yet behind the mask, the man remained fractured, haunted by memories and driven by pain. The first year had forged him in fire and shadow, but the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril. Would the darkness consume him entirely, or could the light of Anakin Skywalker ever be reclaimed? Only time would tell as the saga of Darth Vader continued to unfold. Darth Vader's first year was also a time of forming alliances and rivalries that would shape his future. He encountered other Force users who, like him, had fallen into darkness or been twisted by tragedy. Some were pawns of the Emperor, others independent agents with their own agendas. These encounters tested Vader's growing power and his understanding of the Force's shadowy depths. Among these was Lumia, the mysterious Dark Lady of the Sith. Lumia was a former Imperial operative who embraced the dark side after the Empire's rise. She was cunning and skilled, a master of manipulation and deception. Their alliance was uneasy. Both recognized each other's power, but neither fully trusted the other. Lumia offered Vader insights into Sith lore and techniques, pushing him to deepen his connection to the dark side. Yet Vader remained wary, guarding his own ambitions and secrets closely. Another significant figure was the fallen Jedi known as the One Sith, a warrior who had embraced the dark side in defiance of the Empire. This rivalry represented the fractured nature of the Sith and the dangers lurking even within the dark side's ranks. Vader's dealings with these figures highlighted his evolving role, not just as the Emperor's enforcer but as a dark power in his own right. At the same time, Vader continued to battle internal demons. His memories of Padme and the promise of saving her life haunted him deeply. Though she was gone, the love he bore her remained a fragile thread, connecting him to his former humanity. This emotional turmoil sometimes erupted in violent outbursts or brooding isolation. Vader was a man torn between loyalty to his master, duty to the Empire, and the faint, aching hope of redemption. Throughout the galaxy, whispers spread of a dark lord, consumed by both rage and sorrow. His presence cast a long shadow, inspiring terror and fascination alike. Vader's first year was a crucible, one that forged not only a terrifying warrior, but a legend destined to haunt the galaxy for generations. The early months of Vader's reign were marked by relentless hunting of Jedi survivors. The galaxy was vast, and many Jedi had fled or gone into hiding, desperate to escape the Emperor's wrath. Vader took this task personally, viewing the hunt as both a mission of vengeance and a way to sever the last ties to his former life. His knowledge of Jedi tactics and habits made him a uniquely dangerous predator. He tracked Jedi across star systems, often engaging them in brutal confrontations that tested his growing mastery of the dark side. One of his first major confrontations was on the outer rim planet of Ryloth. Ryloth was home to several Jedi refugees, including a small enclave of Force-sensitive Twi'leks. Vader led a strike force to root out these survivors. The battle was fierce, fought in the twisting tunnels and harsh deserts of the planet. Vader used fear and force, crushing resistance with overwhelming power. He engaged in a deadly duel with a Twi'lek Jedi Master named Vennik, who fought valiantly but was ultimately defeated. This victory bolstered Vader's reputation and further cemented his resolve. Yet the hunt also revealed unexpected challenges. Some Jedi had adapted to the shadows, learning to avoid detection or employ guerrilla tactics. This forced Vader to become more cunning, using spies, informants, and the Inquisitors to flush them out. His obsession with the hunt became a driving force in his life, a dark compulsion fueled by rage and regret. Vader's pursuit of the Jedi was also deeply personal. He hunted those who had once been his allies, his mentors, and in some cases his friends. Each confrontation was a painful reminder of what he had lost and what he had become. As the year wore on, Vader's tactics evolved. He began to employ psychological warfare, using intimidation and terror to weaken his enemies before striking. This approach was chillingly effective, spreading fear that often led to surrender or betrayal within Jedi ranks. Despite his growing power, Vader remained haunted by doubts and memories. He struggled to reconcile the cold efficiency of his actions with the lingering humanity beneath the mask. This inner conflict was a constant undercurrent in his first year, shaping every decision and encounter. Among the most haunting aspects of the hunt was Vader's search for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi was more than a former friend. He was the man who had defeated Anakin on Mustafar, leaving him broken and reborn as Vader. The rivalry between them was personal and bitter, charged with years of history and betrayal. Vader's search for Kenobi became an obsession, a driving force that pushed him into some of the darkest corners of the galaxy. He scoured known Jedi hiding places, interrogated informants, and sent his Inquisitors on countless missions to locate his former master. Though he failed to find Kenobi during his first year, the hunt intensified, setting the stage for future confrontations. In parallel to his hunt for Jedi, Vader also began to build a network of spies and informants within the Imperial bureaucracy. This network was vital for tracking dissidents, rebels, and anyone who might threaten the Empire or his own position. Vader's growing political savvy was a marked change from the impulsive Jedi he once was. He learned to wield influence and fear as tools to maintain control and command respect. By the end of his first year, Vader had become not just a warrior but a master of manipulation and intimidation. His name was whispered in fear across star systems, a shadow looming over any who dared resist the Empire. Yet behind the legend and the mask, the man beneath was still haunted, trapped between what he was and what he had become. The journey through Darth Vader's first year was not merely a march of destruction and conquest. Beneath the black armor and the merciless exterior, an internal war raged between the Dark Lord he was commanded to be and the man he once was, Anakin Skywalker. This conflict was the true crucible shaping his destiny, a silent battle waged deep within the confines of his scarred body and tortured soul. Anakin Skywalker's memory lingered in the shadows, haunting Vader in moments of quiet, slipping through cracks in his otherwise impenetrable mask. The Jedi he had been, the hopes he had once carried, and the love he had lost were wounds that refused to heal. Though the dark side gave Vader immense power, it could not erase the echoes of a past filled with light. At times, these memories surfaced as flickers of pain. Visions of Padmé's gentle smile, the sound of her voice, the promise of a future that never came to pass. These moments were dangerous vulnerabilities, fleeting cracks in the armor of a man trying to sever his ties to the light. To protect himself, Vader would suppress these memories with rage and violence. The more he surrendered to the dark side, the more those fleeting glimpses were buried beneath layers of bitterness and anger. Yet, they never disappeared completely. In quiet moments alone, Vader wrestled with the ghost of Anakin Skywalker. His meditations were often fraught with turmoil, the Force revealing both power and pain intertwined. In these sessions, Vader sometimes glimpsed what might have been a life not consumed by hatred, but filled with hope. These visions tormented him, a reminder of everything lost and everything sacrificed. The internal war shaped much of Vader's behavior during his first year. His rage was as much a shield as a weapon, a way to keep the past at bay. He lashed out at enemies and allies alike, driven by a need to prove himself and deny his lingering doubts. Yet behind the fury was a profound loneliness, a man trapped by his choices and the unforgiving path he had chosen. His cybernetic body, while granting him superhuman strength, also served as a constant reminder of his physical and emotional scars. Each movement was a struggle against pain and limitation. The heavy armor that protected him also isolated him from the world, creating a barrier as much psychological as physical. Vader's breathing, the iconic rasping sound, was a symbol of both his survival and his imprisonment. It was a reminder that beneath the armor was a man clinging to life by the thinnest of threads. This duality, the powerful Dark Lord and the broken man, defined Vader's first year. It informed his decisions, his interactions, and his relentless pursuit of the Jedi and the Emperor's enemies. At times, this internal conflict led Vader to question his own path. Was he truly beyond redemption, or could the man he once was be saved? Such questions were dangerous, potentially fatal in the eyes of the Emperor. Palpatine demanded absolute loyalty and absolute submission to the dark side. Any hint of weakness or hesitation could be punished with death or worse. For Vader, these questions were private torments, whispered only in the silence of his meditation chamber. Despite the Emperor's watchful eye, Vader found brief solace in these moments of introspection. They were his last connection to Anakin Skywalker and the light that had once burned brightly within him. Vader's struggle with identity also influenced his relationships with others. He remained distant from even his closest allies, fearing that attachment might reignite the feelings he sought to bury. This isolation deepened his sense of loneliness and alienation. It also made him more dangerous, as his anger and pain fueled his power and ruthlessness. In some ways, Vader's first year was a quest for self-understanding, as much as it was a campaign of conquest. He sought to reconcile the man he had been with the Dark Lord he had become. This journey was marked by pain, loss, and occasional flashes of hope. It was a path walked alone, beneath the weight of a destiny forged in fire and shadow. As the year drew to a close, Vader stood at a crossroads. His power had grown, his enemies were hunted, and the Empire's grip tightened. Yet within him, the war between light and dark raged on. Would he continue down the path of destruction, or could he find a way back to the man he once was? Only time would reveal the answers hidden in the depths of Darth Vader's soul. Darth Vader's emergence was not only a personal transformation but also a turning point for the Empire's military might. His presence galvanized Imperial forces and instilled a terrifying new level of discipline and fear. During Vader's first year, he became the spearhead of the Emperor's campaign to consolidate power and crush all opposition. He was the symbol and the enforcer of the new order, wielding both political influence and raw destructive power. Vader oversaw the deployment of vast Imperial fleets, coordinating attacks on rebel bases and remnants of the Jedi Order. His strategic mind, honed during his years as a Jedi general, was now repurposed to serve the dark ambitions of the Sith. He personally commanded assaults on key systems, turning planets into battlegrounds and symbols of Imperial dominance. The Death Star, the Emperor's ultimate weapon, became a focal point of Vader's efforts. Though it was still under construction during much of his first year, Vader was closely involved in overseeing its deployment and security. He understood the immense power it represented and the fear it could sow across the galaxy. Vader's leadership style was brutal and uncompromising. He demanded absolute loyalty from his officers and punished failure with swift and unforgiving consequences. This created an environment of fear, but also one of efficiency, where obedience was paramount and dissent crushed before it could take root. His presence on the battlefield was a game changer. Troops reported that the sight of Vader clad in black armor and wielding his crimson lightsaber was enough to break enemy morale. Stories spread of his ability to cut through entire squads of enemies with ease, his mastery of the Force making him seemingly invincible. Vader's involvement also extended to the training of elite stormtroopers and special forces. He helped shape the Empire's new military doctrine, emphasizing fear, precision, and overwhelming power. Under his guidance, these forces became instruments of terror and control across the galaxy. One of Vader's key military campaigns during this period was the pacification of the Outer Rim territories. These remote and often lawless regions were hotbeds of rebellion and resistance. Vader's strategy combined direct military action with political manipulation, breaking alliances among local factions and installing imperial governors loyal to the Emperor. The campaign was costly and brutal, but it achieved significant results, tightening the Empire's grip on the fringes of the galaxy. Vader's personal involvement in these operations was a clear message. The Emperor's will was absolute, and resistance would be crushed without mercy. Despite the military successes, Vader remained haunted by the costs of war, both personal and galactic. He witnessed countless lives destroyed, planets laid to waste, and the slow erosion of freedom across the stars. This knowledge fueled his complex relationship with the Empire, devoted yet conflicted, loyal yet burdened by guilt. Vader's influence within the Imperial hierarchy grew steadily. He was more than a warrior. He was a political figure whose counsel the Emperor valued highly. His insights into the Force and the Jedi made him indispensable in the Emperor's plans to eliminate all threats. Yet Vader's ascent also bred envy and fear among other Imperial leaders. Some saw him as a rival, a dark force that might one day challenge the Emperor himself. This tension added another layer of complexity to Vader's first year, as he navigated court intrigues and power struggles. Despite these challenges, Vader remained focused on his mission. He embraced his role as the Emperor's enforcer, knowing that his own survival depended on unwavering loyalty and unrelenting power. The first year of Darth Vader was thus a time of transformation, not only of a man, but of an empire. It was a year marked by fear, war, and the relentless march of darkness across the galaxy. Through it all, Vader stood as a symbol of the New Order, a dark lord whose shadow would loom large for decades to come. One of the most insidious and crucial elements of Darth Vader's first year was the establishment and empowerment of the Inquisitors. These dark side agents were specially trained to seek out and eliminate Jedi survivors who managed to evade the initial purge. The Inquisition was a tool of terror, working in the shadows to root out resistance and strike fear into any who dared oppose the Empire. Vader was not only the master of the Inquisitors, but also their ruthless mentor and sometimes judge. He personally oversaw their training, pushing them to embrace the dark side fully, while honing their skills in combat, espionage, and interrogation. The Inquisitors came from varied backgrounds, former Jedi, Force-sensitive orphans, and even some who had little knowledge of the Force but were trained to use it under Vader's guidance. They wore dark robes and distinctive masks, often adorned with Sith symbolism, designed to terrify and intimidate. The first Inquisitor, a fallen Jedi known as the Grand Inquisitor, was the head of this order and Vader's closest lieutenant in their operations. The Grand Inquisitor was a skilled warrior, once a member of the Jedi Temple Guard, who had fallen from grace. His knowledge of Jedi teachings and tactics made him a formidable adversary and a valuable asset to Vader's mission. Together, Vader and the Grand Inquisitor led campaigns across the galaxy, hunting Jedi enclaves and sabotaging rebel operations. Their methods were brutal: interrogations using the Force, psychological torture, and swift executions were common. The Inquisition's activities helped the Empire tighten its grip and eliminate pockets of resistance that might have otherwise grown into significant threats. However, The rise of the Inquisitors also stirred fear and resentment within the Empire's ranks. Many officers viewed them as dangerous fanatics, unpredictable and excessively cruel. This created tension and occasional conflict, with some military leaders pushing back against the Inquisitors' overreach. Despite this, Vader maintained tight control over the Inquisition, using them to extend his reach and ensure no Jedi or rebel could escape justice. The Inquisitors also served as a testbed for Vader's evolving combat style. He experimented with new tactics, training methods, and dark side techniques, refining his approach as a hunter of the Force. This period of mentorship and command deepened Vader's mastery and solidified his reputation as the galaxy's most feared Dark Lord. Throughout these campaigns, Vader also confronted his own limits and weaknesses. He was forced to confront adversaries who matched or even surpassed him in power and cunning. Each encounter was a lesson, pushing him to grow stronger and adapt. At times, Vader's frustration with the Inquisitors' failures was palpable. He expected absolute obedience and results, punishing failure harshly to maintain discipline and efficiency. The Inquisition was both an extension of Vader's will and a reflection of his own inner turmoil, relentless, unforgiving, and driven by a deep hunger for control. By the end of his first year, the Inquisition had become an indispensable arm of the Empire's dark power. Its agents were feared across the galaxy, and their successes bolstered Vader's standing with the Emperor. Yet beneath the surface, the seeds of future conflict were already being sown. The Inquisitors' growing autonomy and ambition hinted at challenges Vader would face in the years to come. But for now, in this first year, they were a vital weapon in the Dark Lord's arsenal, one that would shape the fate of the galaxy in profound ways. Darth Vader's first year was not just defined by the relentless pursuit of Jedi, or the brutal enforcement of the Emperor's will on the battlefield. It was also a complex dance of politics, intrigue, and power within the very heart of the Galactic Empire. While many imagine Vader as merely the Emperor's ruthless enforcer, the reality of his early role involved navigating treacherous political waters, balancing loyalty, ambition, and survival. The Imperial Court was a labyrinthine arena, filled with ambitious officials, scheming bureaucrats, and rival commanders, all vying for favor and influence. Vader had to assert his presence and authority in this environment, while never losing sight of his ultimate mission or provoking the Emperor's wrath. At the center of this court was Emperor Palpatine himself, the master manipulator who kept his subordinates in check through fear, cunning, and subtle threats. Palpatine's expectations for Vader were clear: absolute loyalty, unyielding obedience, and results. But beneath this directive was a complicated relationship, one marked by power, dependence, and occasional tension. Vader, while subordinate, was also a potential rival. The Emperor saw Vader as both a tool and a threat, a Dark Lord with immense power, who could one day challenge his supremacy. This precarious balance shaped much of Vader's political maneuvering during his first year. Vader knew that gaining the Emperor's trust required more than military success. It meant proving his worth through diplomacy, intelligence, and subtle displays of power. One of Vader's strategies was to cultivate relationships with influential figures within the Imperial bureaucracy. He reached out to governors, admirals, and officials who could provide valuable information or support. This network of allies and informants helped Vader maintain a flow of intelligence critical to hunting Jedi and suppressing dissent. At the same time, Vader was careful to avoid appearing overly ambitious or threatening to those who might report to Palpatine. He walked a fine line, demonstrating strength without arrogance, loyalty without complacency. The political games extended to his interactions with other high-ranking Imperial officials. Figures like Grand Moff Tarkin, Governor Wilhuff Tarkin, and Admiral Uzzle were all players in this dangerous arena. Vader's relationships with them ranged from cooperative to contentious, depending on circumstances and competing interests. Tarkin, for example, was a ruthless and pragmatic leader who often clashed with Vader's more force-driven approach. Their interactions were marked by a grudging respect, mixed with rivalry, each understanding the other's value, but wary of the other's influence. Vader also had to navigate the ambitions of the Imperial Security Bureau and the intelligence services. These organizations operated in shadows similar to Vader's own domain and sometimes encroached on his authority. Conflicts arose over jurisdiction, information control, and operational priorities. Vader's response was to assert dominance through both fear and calculated alliances, ensuring his influence remained unchallenged. Behind these political maneuvers was Vader's constant effort to maintain his own identity and power base. Unlike many Imperial leaders who relied solely on rank and title, Vader had the Force and the dark legacy of Anakin Skywalker behind him. This gave him unique leverage and made him a figure both respected and feared. Vader's presence in the Imperial court was both a stabilizing force and a source of instability. He could enforce the Emperor's will with brutal efficiency, but also acted according to his own evolving goals and emotions. Throughout his first year, Vader's political savvy grew. He learned to use intimidation, negotiation, and subtle manipulation to achieve his ends. He cultivated an aura of mystery and power, which kept potential rivals cautious and subordinates obedient. Vader's reputation was a tool as much as his lightsaber or Force abilities. Whispers and rumors about his deeds, power, and ruthlessness spread through the corridors of the Imperial Palace and beyond. This reputation served both as a warning and a shield. It protected Vader from political attacks and ensured that many dared not cross him. Yet beneath this formidable exterior, Vader was acutely aware of his precarious position. He knew the Emperor's watchful eye was always upon him, and that any misstep could be fatal. This awareness made Vader cautious, measured, and patient. He understood that ultimate power was a game of endurance, subtlety, and timing. One of the key challenges Vader faced in the Imperial court was the lingering suspicion and resentment many held against him for his fall from the Jedi Order. Some officials viewed him as a tragic figure, others as a dangerous fanatic. This mixed perception created both obstacles and opportunities. Vader exploited these views, using them to unsettle rivals or garner sympathy when advantageous. In his dealings with the Emperor, Vader occasionally showed a flicker of the old Anakin's pride and defiance. Though careful not to provoke outright conflict, he tested limits and asserted his own vision for the Empire's future. This was a delicate balance, requiring wisdom and restraint. In private moments, Vader reflected on the nature of power and destiny. He knew the dark side granted strength, but demanded sacrifice. He pondered whether he was merely a pawn or if he could carve his own path. These thoughts influenced his political actions, fueling his ambition and caution in equal measure. Vader's first year in the Imperial court set the stage for his later rise as a near-autonomous ruler within the Empire. Though still bound to the Emperor's will, he laid the groundwork for a future where he might seize ultimate power. The political shadows of his early days were as crucial to his legend as the lightsaber duels and battles he fought. In this hidden realm of whispers and plots, Vader became not just a warrior, but a master strategist and player. As the year closed, the galaxy knew that Darth Vader was more than a mere executioner. He was a force reshaping the Empire from within. Darth Vader's first year was a crucible of transformation. Beyond the armor, beyond the relentless hunt for Jedi and enemies of the Empire, Vader waged a more personal and profound battle, a battle for mastery over the Force itself. The Force was no longer a simple tool or weapon, but a complex, living entity, sometimes an ally, sometimes a tormentor. At his awakening on the medical table, Vader had felt the Force pull away like a fading echo, a shadow of his former connection. The man who had once been Anakin Skywalker had wielded the Force with an almost natural grace and intensity. But now, the dark armor and cybernetic limbs created a barrier, a filter that dulled his senses and complicated his communion with the Force. His body was part machine, part flesh, and the organic link to the Force was strained and fractured. This reality frustrated Vader deeply. He felt the power slipping, elusive as smoke through his fingers. In moments of quiet meditation, he searched desperately for the connection that once defined him, but instead of clarity, he often found pain, regret, and confusion. It was during these moments that the shadow of Anakin Skywalker loomed largest, a ghost whispering what had been lost and what might still be. Vader realized that mastery of the Force would require more than raw power or rage. It demanded discipline, focus, and acceptance of his new reality. He began a rigorous regimen of training and self-reflection. This was no longer about the flashy duels and heroic feats of the past, but about understanding the deeper currents of the Force and bending them to his will. Vader experimented with new Force techniques, pushing beyond the limits of his former Jedi training. He delved into Sith teachings, ancient and dark, seeking forbidden knowledge to restore and amplify his strength. Among these were techniques to manipulate life energy, to sense and control others' emotions, and to dominate the physical world through sheer will. But this power came at a cost. Each use of the dark side further eroded his remaining humanity, driving a wedge between the man he once was and the monster he was becoming. Yet paradoxically, it was in these moments of power that the flickers of Anakin's spirit sometimes resurfaced. Vader found himself drawn to visions and memories that challenged the ruthless image he projected. He saw Padmé's face, heard the laughter of his children, felt the warmth of a life he had destroyed. These visions were painful, but they were also a source of unexpected strength. They reminded Vader that beneath the armor was a man capable of love and hope, even if buried beneath layers of pain and hatred. This internal struggle influenced Vader's approach to the Force and his enemies. He no longer sought only destruction, but also control over himself, over his emotions, and over the galaxy. He realized that true power lay not just in raw strength, but in mastery over the self and the currents of the Force. During his first year, Vader also began to explore the Force in ways that blurred the lines between light and dark. He studied Jedi texts salvaged from the ruins of the Temple and Sith tomes hidden in the deepest archives. His goal was to create a synthesis, using the full spectrum of the Force's potential to transcend both Jedi dogma and Sith fanaticism. This dangerous path required secrecy and discretion. If Palpatine or the Inquisitors discovered Vader's experiments, they would view it as heresy and betrayal. Yet Vader's ambition was vast, and he was willing to risk everything to achieve his vision. At times, he reached out through the Force in meditation to seek guidance, communicating with the spirits of the past, even his former masters and mentors. These spiritual encounters were fraught with tension and emotion. Some offered wisdom, others challenged him with reminders of his failings. Through these interactions, Vader began to understand that redemption was not a distant dream, but a complex possibility, intertwined with sacrifice and struggle. This awareness did not weaken him, but fueled his determination to become more than a tool of the Emperor. It planted the seeds of doubt and hope that would later blossom in critical moments of his story. Vader's mastery of the Force was also tested in combat during his first year. He faced Jedi survivors, Sith rivals, and rebel champions, each encounter a crucible revealing his strengths and weaknesses. He learned to adapt, developing new fighting styles that compensated for his armored limitations and augmented his abilities. His lightsaber techniques became more methodical, focusing on precision and overwhelming force rather than agility. Vader's presence on the battlefield was both a nightmare and a revelation. Enemies feared his power. Allies respected his command. Yet, beneath the surface, the question of who wielded the true power, the Dark Lord or the man beneath, remained unresolved. As the year ended, Vader's journey through the Force remained a work in progress, a blend of mastery and uncertainty, power and vulnerability. He had become a living paradox, a Dark Lord haunted by the light he once embodied. The shadows of redemption and ruin intertwined in his destiny, shaping the legend of Darth Vader that would echo through the galaxy for decades to come. The year had not been kind to Vader's body, but his mind and spirit were a battlefield of their own. In moments of solitude, Vader grappled with the duality that defined him. Machine and man, darkness and flickers of light. He realized that the Force was more than a power to wield. It was a reflection of his own inner turmoil. The deeper Vader went into the dark side, the more he sensed the Force pushing back, not simply as an external energy but as a living presence with its own will. At times he felt the Force whisper warnings, echoes of the past that hinted at future consequences. These whispers were subtle, but impossible to ignore. Vader's nightmares, already frequent, often featured cryptic messages from the Force itself, visions of destruction, loss, and a path not yet taken. Such dreams left him shaken, yet strangely invigorated, compelling him to push harder, learn more, and never rest. This relentless drive sometimes alienated those around him, even his closest allies. The Inquisitors, for example, respected Vader's power, but feared his unpredictability. His experiments with the Force and secret studies were rumors whispered in the shadows of Imperial corridors. Some speculated that Vader sought to surpass the Emperor. Others believed he was searching for a way to heal his fractured soul. Yet none dared confront him directly, for his wrath was swift and merciless. Vader's mastery of the Force evolved in tandem with his command over the Empire's forces. He employed the Force not just as a weapon in battle, but as a tool for intelligence gathering and control. Through the Force, Vader could sense the emotions and intentions of others across vast distances. This ability made him an unparalleled strategist and feared interrogator. He used the Force to root out spies and traitors within the Empire, often striking before they realized they were discovered. His reputation for psychological torment was as potent as his lightsaber in quelling rebellion. Yet beneath the iron fist lay a man haunted by questions about his own path. Was this truly the destiny he had chosen, or was he a prisoner of forces beyond his control? These questions lingered, unspoken, but ever present, shaping his actions in subtle ways. During this period, Vader also began to experiment with Force techniques that bordered on the forbidden, even by Sith standards. He studied the manipulation of life essence, attempting to find ways to heal his own damaged body, or even resurrect what was lost. The idea of cheating death itself fascinated him, though it remained elusive. Some ancient Sith rituals hinted at such possibilities, but they required sacrifices and power beyond what Vader yet commanded. Still, his pursuit of this knowledge revealed his underlying vulnerability, a desperate desire to reclaim a past irrevocably lost. This thirst for mastery and redemption shaped much of Vader's secret research during his first year. He worked in the depths of Imperial facilities, often alone, surrounded by Sith relics and ancient texts salvaged from the ruins of Jedi temples and Sith strongholds. His studies were meticulous and relentless, each page turned fueling his obsession. These hidden hours away from public eyes allowed Vader to confront his fears, regrets, and hopes in ways he could never express openly. Yet, the Emperor's shadow loomed over all, a constant reminder of the power and danger that governed Vader's life. Palpatine demanded results and loyalty, and any hint of deviation or weakness was met with suspicion. Vader had to cloak his deeper ambitions carefully, balancing obedience with his personal quest for power and possibly redemption. The balance was delicate, a single misstep risking death or worse, eternal servitude under the Emperor's iron fist. Despite the dangers, Vader's resolve grew stronger. He was determined to become more than a mere instrument of destruction. He wanted to command his own fate and reshape the galaxy according to his vision. This vision was dark, but not without complexity. It was a future where power and justice, fear and hope, destruction and creation intertwined in a new order, forged by Vader himself. Throughout this journey, memories of Padme Amidala remained a silent, aching presence. Her death, shrouded in mystery and tragedy, fueled both his rage and sorrow. At times, Vader sought solace in memories of her kindness and love, the only light in his consumed existence. Other times, those memories ignited fury, reminding him of what he had lost and what he might never reclaim. This emotional complexity was a hidden engine driving Vader's actions, his brutality and occasional moments of hesitation. Though outwardly ruthless, Vader's heart was a battleground of grief and longing, shaping his relationship with the Force and the galaxy itself. As the year drew to a close, Vader faced a defining moment. An encounter with a powerful Jedi survivor. tested not only his combat skills but the core of his being. The duel was fierce and revealing, each strike a clash of past and present, light and dark. In this confrontation, Vader glimpsed the man he once was and the monster he had become. The battle pushed him to the limits of his strength and will, forcing a reckoning with his own identity. Though victorious, Vader emerged from the fight changed, more aware of the cost of his power and the fragile balance he maintained. This encounter marked a turning point, signaling the end of his first year and the beginning of a new chapter in his dark saga. He was no longer simply a weapon or a shadow of Anakin Skywalker. He was Darth Vader, Dark Lord, Hunter, and a complex force struggling to define his destiny amidst the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with shadows and secrets. For Darth Vader, these shadows became his hunting grounds, places where Jedi survivors lurked, hidden but not forgotten. In the first year of his dark rebirth, Vader took on a singular mission: to erase the last traces of the Jedi Order. This task was more than duty, it was personal vengeance. Every Jedi he hunted was a reminder of his past failures and the life he had lost. The hunt tested Vader's skills, patience, and resolve in ways no battle ever could. He learned to track subtle force signatures, to read signs invisible to others, and to use fear as both a weapon and a shield. His methods were ruthless and efficient. Infiltrating rebel enclaves, interrogating informants, and employing the shadowy agents of the Empire, Vader left no stone unturned. Yet, the deeper he sank into the hunt, the heavier the burden on his soul. Vader found himself haunted by the faces of those he once called allies, friends and mentors, now enemies to be destroyed. This psychological weight seeped into his every action, coloring his decisions with rage, regret, and sometimes a flicker of mercy. The duality of Vader's nature, part machine, part man, played out vividly in these encounters. His cybernetic body granted him strength beyond measure, but it was his force mastery and unyielding will that made him terrifying. Yet even with these powers, Vader was not invincible. Some Jedi proved elusive, their skills and knowledge a constant challenge. These battles were as much mental as physical, a chess game of patience and strategy. Vader's reputation grew with every victory and every whisper of his dark presence. Galactic systems learned to fear the shadow that fell with his approach. But this fear came at a cost. Vader's relentless crusade isolated him from those around him, even from the Emperor. He became a solitary figure, burdened by the ghosts of his past and the horrors of his present. This isolation fed the darkness within him, sharpening his edge, but dulling his humanity. Vader's first year was marked by a growing internal conflict, a battle between the unforgiving dark side and the remnants of the man he once was. He grappled with questions of destiny, power, and the possibility of redemption. Each Jedi faced was a mirror reflecting his own fractured identity. At times, Vader found himself hesitating, moments of doubt fleeting but profound. These moments were dangerous weaknesses in a life defined by strength and ruthlessness. Yet they were also the seeds of a future redemption that few could foresee. Throughout this year, Vader's encounters with Jedi survivors revealed not only their strengths but also their vulnerabilities. Many were broken by loss and exile, struggling to survive in a galaxy that had turned hostile. Some sought peace, others vengeance. Vader's pursuit forced him to confront the varied faces of resistance and the consequences of his own actions. This understanding deepened his complexity as a character, no longer a simple villain, but a tragic figure, caught between fate and choice. His hunt was relentless, but it was also a journey through his own psyche, a dark pilgrimage toward an uncertain future. Vader's methods evolved with experience. He combined brute force with subtlety, terror with negotiation, and power with patience. His infamous interrogations became legendary, blending the physical and the psychological to extract secrets and break wills. The fear he instilled was a weapon as sharp as his blade. But Vader was not infallible. He suffered setbacks and defeats, some costly and painful. These failures tested his resolve but also taught him humility and caution. They reminded him that even a Dark Lord must adapt to survive. As the year closed, Vader's legacy was taking shape, a figure of dread and awe, whose shadow stretched across the galaxy. Yet beneath the mask, the man was still fighting a battle that no armor or weapon could win, the battle for his own soul. Despite his fearsome reputation and immense power, Vader was far from invincible in his first year. The armor that sustained his shattered body also posed constant dangers, limitations that his enemies quickly learned to exploit. On more than one occasion, the Dark Lord found himself in deadly peril, forced to confront not just Jedi foes but the vulnerabilities of his own machine-like form. One such harrowing encounter occurred during a covert mission on the dense forest world of Felucia. Vader had been tracking a small group of Jedi survivors believed to be hiding in the planet's thick bioluminescent jungles. The environment itself was hostile, with dangerous flora and fauna adding layers of challenge to his pursuit. His heavy armor, designed for intimidation and protection, was ill-suited for such terrain. It hampered his movements, his bulky limbs snagging on thick vines and moss-covered branches. The cumbersome suit was far slower and less agile than the lithe bodies of the Jedi he hunted. During the hunt, Vader's left leg, a prosthetic grafted with inferior alloys and flawed electromotors, malfunctioned. The joint seized unexpectedly, causing him to stumble and lose balance on a narrow, slippery ridge. Before he could recover, one of the Jedi sprung from the shadows, a master of Ataru, the aggressive, acrobatic lightsaber form that relied on speed and agility. The Jedi's blade flashed, striking at the seams of Vader's armor, targeting the joints where metal met synthetic flesh. Vader felt the sting of the attack as his armor was breached, the pain amplified by the nerves interfaced with his cybernetic limbs. For the first time since his transformation, the Dark Lord faced the terrifying reality of mortality. The Jedi pressed the attack, forcing Vader into defensive moves that strained his weakened limbs and limited mobility. His usual brute force tactics were ineffective in this environment, and his frustration grew with each failed strike. As the battle raged, Vader realized he had underestimated both his enemy and the limits of his own body. His breathing, amplified by the ventilator strapped to his chest, was loud and uneven, giving away his position. The suit's internal systems beeped and whirred, struggling to regulate temperature and power in the humid jungle air. In a moment of desperation, Vader summoned the Force with raw intensity. With a surge of power, he hurled a massive tree trunk at the Jedi, knocking him off balance. But the effort left Vader drained and exposed, his systems overheating. The battle teetered on the edge of disaster for the Dark Lord. Only through sheer will and a quick adaptation in fighting style did Vader manage to turn the tide. He abandoned his usual direct confrontations, instead relying on calculated, precise strikes aimed at disabling his opponent. He leveraged the Force to manipulate the environment, crushing vines, shifting debris to create obstacles and limit the Jedi's movements. Slowly, methodically, Vader wore down his adversary until he could deliver the final decisive blow. The encounter left Vader shaken and wounded. More than the physical injuries, it exposed his vulnerabilities and forced a brutal reckoning with his new form. Vader realized that the armor was both his prison and his weapon, a tool that required constant maintenance, adaptation, and respect. He began extensive modifications to improve its flexibility, mobility, and responsiveness. His tinkering was meticulous, drawing on his pre-transformation skills as a mechanic and pilot. Over weeks, he worked with Imperial engineers and secret Sith technologists to redesign joint actuators, upgrade synthetic skin, and optimize internal life support systems. Each upgrade was a step toward reclaiming lost agility and reclaiming his dominance on the battlefield. But the process was painful and slow. Vader often found himself frustrated by the limits of technology, longing for the freedom of his old flesh and blood body. Yet his resolve never wavered. Every scar, every system failure, every adaptation brought him closer to becoming the perfect fusion of man and machine. The lessons of Felucia haunted him as a reminder that power alone was insufficient without adaptability and respect for his own weaknesses. This near-death experience instilled in Vader a new caution and strategic mindset. He began to approach hunts with greater patience, using intimidation and the Force to weaken enemies before striking. His once furious, direct combat style gave way to one marked by cold calculation and ruthless efficiency. Vader learned to harness fear as a weapon, breaking enemy morale before battle even began. The psychological aspect of his hunt became as important as physical confrontation. His name became synonymous with dread in the underworld and among surviving Jedi cells. Even those who had never seen him feared the shadow he cast. This fear was a tool Vader wielded expertly, one that made his task easier but also deepened his isolation. The more he relied on darkness and terror, the further he drifted from any remnants of his former self. His nights were filled with restless sleep, haunted by visions of past failures and possible futures. The suit, once a lifeline, increasingly felt like a tomb. Vader's pain was not just physical but existential, a question of what remained of Anakin Skywalker beneath the machine and the mask. Despite this, Vader pressed on, driven by an unrelenting purpose. He understood that survival in this form required constant evolution. The galaxy was changing, and he had to change with it or be destroyed. His near-fatal encounter on Felucia was a turning point, one that defined his first year as Darth Vader and set the stage for the legend he would become. In the weeks following Felucia, Vader's determination to overcome his physical limitations intensified. He spent long hours in Imperial maintenance bays, working tirelessly alongside droids and engineers, personally overseeing every detail of his armor's reconstruction. He rejected complacency, refusing to accept that his body's constraints defined his fate. The internal mechanics of his suit were upgraded with new synthetic muscles and servos designed to better mimic human movement. Advanced processors were integrated into his cybernetics, enhancing reaction times and coordination. Yet, no upgrade could fully restore the natural grace and fluidity he had lost. This absence was a constant source of frustration and anger, fueling his relentless drive. Every failed movement was a reminder of the man he had been and the monster he now embodied. During this time, Vader's hunts became more strategic and clandestine. Rather than brute force, he employed the Imperial intelligence networks and dark side informants to gather precise information about Jedi locations and movements. He cultivated a network of spies, bounty hunters, and former Jedi turned inquisitors, each playing a role in the hunt. These agents operated in the shadows, spreading fear and uncertainty, softening targets before Vader arrived. When Vader did strike, it was with overwhelming force and terrifying efficiency. One such mission took him to the icy wastelands of the planet Orto-Plutonia. There, a small group of Jedi refugees had made a hidden refuge in abandoned mining caves. The harsh environment was a test of Vader's endurance and control over his suit's life support systems. The cold seeped through layers of armor, testing the limits of his cybernetic functions. Vader pressed on, determined to root out this last vestige of Jedi resistance. Inside the cavern's depths, he faced a Jedi master skilled in defensive lightsaber forms and the subtle arts of Force illusions. The battle was brutal and drawn out, forcing Vader to conserve energy and carefully manage his suit's limitations. The Jedi's agility and mastery of the Force made him a formidable opponent, forcing Vader to innovate tactics on the fly. He used the environment itself as a weapon, collapsing cave walls and manipulating terrain with the Force to trap his foe. At one point, Vader nearly succumbed to a Force choke that disrupted his breathing apparatus. His ventilator sputtered, alarms blaring within the helmet as oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. In those agonizing moments, Vader's survival instincts kicked in, pushing the limits of his dark side powers to maintain control. Eventually, he subdued the Jedi, delivering a merciless final strike. The victory was costly, leaving Vader battered and physically drained, but it reaffirmed his ruthless efficiency. These encounters shaped Vader's growing legend, not just as an unstoppable warrior, but as a relentless hunter who embodied fear itself. His name, whispered across star systems, became synonymous with death and judgment. Yet, each victory also deepened the chasm within him. The more Jedi he destroyed, the more he confronted his own fractured identity and the ghosts of his past. Vader's solitude was profound. Few dared approach him beyond formal orders from the Emperor, and even fewer truly understood the torment behind the mask. In rare moments of quiet, Vader would meditate on what he had become. He questioned if this path was his destiny or a prison crafted by his own choices and manipulation. His nightmares persisted. Visions of Padme, the fiery jewel on Mustafar, and the endless darkness of the void. But beneath the mask, there remained a flicker of the boy who once dreamed of freedom and peace. This flicker was fragile, vulnerable to the consuming power of the dark side. Vader's internal conflict was a war as fierce as any battle fought in the galaxy. As the first year of his existence as Darth Vader drew to a close, he stood at a crossroads. He was a being forged in fire and shadow, wielding power few could imagine. Yet, the cost was his very soul. Would he continue down this path of destruction, or seek a redemption that seemed ever out of reach? Only time would reveal the answers. For now, Vader was the dark enforcer of the Empire, the harbinger of fear and the embodiment of relentless will, and the galaxy trembled beneath his shadow. The passage of time in Darth Vader's first year was marked by constant change. Every mission, every battle, every haunting memory chipped away at the remnants of Anakin Skywalker. Yet, despite the darkness that engulfed him, there were moments fleeting and fragile, where the old man fought to breathe beneath the armor. The Emperor, Darth Sidious, watched closely. Palpatine was a master manipulator, patient and calculating. He understood that Vader's transformation was not just physical but deeply psychological. He allowed Vader to grow in power and fearsome reputation, knowing that the Dark Lord's torment would bind him to the Sith's cause. Still, the Emperor tested Vader relentlessly. Assignments grew more complex and dangerous, pushing Vader to expand his mastery over the Force and combat. Each mission was a trial, a crucible forging Vader into the perfect weapon of the Empire. Yet the bond between master and apprentice was fragile, built on fear, power, and shared ambition, but also on pain and loss. Vader found himself torn between serving the Emperor and wrestling with his own fractured identity. He often meditated on the man he was before the flames, before the mask. These thoughts were both a comfort and a torment. In quiet moments aboard his starship, Vader would remove his helmet and stare at the scarred flesh beneath. He recalled the life of Anakin Skywalker, the hopeful boy who had dreamed of peace and freedom. But that boy was gone, consumed by the dark side and the weight of his choices. Yet, there remained a faint ember of that light, hidden deep within. This ember fueled Vader's complex nature, a mixture of rage, guilt, and an unspoken desire for redemption. Throughout the year, Vader's relationship with the Force evolved. No longer simply a tool or a weapon, the Force became a silent companion, sometimes cruel, sometimes guiding. Vader learned to channel the dark side with greater precision and control. He delved into Sith lore and ancient techniques, expanding his knowledge and power. Yet, the Force also reminded him of his limits and losses. Visions of Padme, his mother Shmi, and his lost Jedi mentors haunted his dreams and waking moments. These ghosts were reminders of what he had sacrificed and what he could never regain. Despite this, Vader pressed on, driven by duty and the fear of failure. The galaxy around him was changing as well. The Empire solidified its grip, but pockets of rebellion and resistance persisted. Vader's role as the Emperor's enforcer became increasingly vital and more isolated. His command extended beyond mere combat, to shaping imperial policy through fear and intimidation. The first year was only the beginning of a long, dark path, a path that would lead Vader to become a legend feared across the stars. But in these early days, he was still learning, still struggling with the man he had been and the monster he was becoming. And so, the saga of Darth Vader's first year closes, a tale of pain, power, loss, and transformation. A beginning forged in fire and shadow. Thank you for journeying through this holocron. May the Force be with you.